Welcome to Keller United Methodist Church Safe Sanctuary Online Child Protection Training. Please turn up the volume on your device so that you can follow along with the presentation. Training will last about 30 minutes. Required documentation is explained at the end, and this training is for both new applicants and renewing applicants. Before you begin, you will need a copy of the current child protection policy, either printed or electronic, a printed copy of the participation covenant, and a printed copy of the criminal history consent form. As a Christian community of faith and United Methodist congregation, we pledge to conduct the ministry of the gospel in ways that assure the safety and spiritual growth of all of our children and youth, as well as the workers and volunteers who work directly with and supervise the children and youth. Our child protection policy includes progressive safety measures in the selection and recruitment of those who work with children and youth, and also implements procedures for programs and events and educates our workers, helpers, and volunteers regarding the policies and state law. The Child and Youth Protection Policy and this training are both intended to support the mission of this church. We find that our members, visitors, and community take comfort in our proactive approach and are very supportive of the church's efforts to screen volunteers and protect the children and youth. Why do we need a policy? The primary purpose of the Child Protection Policy is to protect the children and youth. Our church can offer a haven and sanctuary for children to be safe, and our church can teach the facts of child abuse and Christian values. That's compassion, justice, repentance, and grace. Our church is a place where kids and adults are able to respond to confusing and painful events using the wisdom of the Scripture. The policy also protects volunteers and workers, providing a safe environment for them to serve, keeping their focus on the mission of the church. Finally, the policy can also protect the church itself. Why are churches at risk? Churches are traditionally trusting. Much of the work of ministry is done by volunteers, and churches provide close personal contact with children. There is a feeling of comfort and safety at church, which is how it should be. Our church provides a safe sanctuary for all those who come here to worship and serve. A written child protection policy is essential to protect kids from abuse, to protect workers from false allegations, and to protect the church itself from liability. Let's talk about the risk factors that allow an opportunity for abuse. Doors that lock or windows with covers. Privacy and secrecy. Chaos and confusion. Lack of adequate supervision. A position of authority over a child or youth. An adult alone with a child or youth. Now let's look at risk factors which contribute to accidents, false reports, misunderstandings, or misguided accusations. A locked door or covered window, privacy and secrecy, chaos and confusion, lack of adequate supervision, questionable touching, an adult alone with a child or youth. As you can see, these risk factors are largely the same ones which allow opportunity for abuse. This child protection policy is designed to protect both the children and the volunteers. How can we make a difference? First, with screening, using reference checks and criminal background checks. Second, with precautions, to prevent a first-time abuser or unreported abuser from offending on our campus or at our functions. To minimize the risk of a supervising person from losing his or her judgment or temper in an out-of-control situation. To avoid false allegations or misunderstandings, and to avoid accidents. Next, with training, assisting in responding to allegations, preventing opportunities for abuse, and providing adequate supervision to avoid accidents. And finally, with reporting, to implement an internal process for reporting suspicion of abuse and to comply with state law. The church policy is developed and updated by the Child Youth Protection Committee and adopted by the church ministry team. You will need to be familiar with the entire policy before you are an eligible volunteer or worker. For this training, we'll talk about the core rules and guidelines. The golden rule at Keller United Methodist Church is the core principle behind our child protection policy. Remember this one simple standard with 3 simple rules at all functions. At least 2 unrelated eligible persons. An uncovered window or an open door. 1 person at least 5 years older than the oldest child or youth participant. Now let's talk about those individual parts of the golden rule. Having two supervisors is a safety net for the children and gives the volunteers and workers accountability as well as support. Why unrelated supervisors? Now, this does not mean that your spouse or children are prohibited from attending a function which you are supervising. Relatives are certainly welcome to serve together. This requirement simply prevents the appointment of relatives as the two leading and supervising persons at a function with children and youth. This is a protection for both the children and the volunteers. By assigning unrelated volunteers, it ensures a transparency and openness in case of a report, misunderstanding, or inquiry. Second, an uncovered window or open door also allows for transparency and comfort for both the volunteers and the parents. These are good examples of uncovered windows and an open door. Finally, having a minimum of one supervisor at least 5 years older than the oldest child or youth participant avoids peers supervising peers. Who must be eligible under the policy? Anyone who works directly with and supervises children and youth at any function sponsored or supported by the church. This does not mean that every person at a function must be eligible. It means that the persons who are working directly with and supervising the children and youth must be eligible. For instance, it's not uncommon for visitors to stay in Sunday school with their small children to be sure that they're comfortable. Parents should feel welcome to observe a function, but note that they are not working directly with and supervising the function in this role. Only eligible persons will be working directly with and supervising the children. There are two types of eligible volunteers. First, an adult volunteer 18 years or older. Adult volunteers must meet 4 requirements. Number 1, be a member of the church for 6 months or a regular attendee at services or ministries of the church for 6 out of the 8 months prior to application. 2, submit to screening, which includes a criminal history check and 3 references from people who have known the applicant for at least 3 years. 3, complete a church-approved training. This online training meets this requirement. 4, sign a participation covenant affirming, among other things, that the applicant has read and understands the policy. The second type of eligible volunteer is a youth, age 16 or 17, specifically approved to be a volunteer. This carries with it the same membership or attendance requirement, a screening with references, the same training requirement, and the same covenant requirement. Proper supervision allows for ministries to be most effective. There are some larger functions where the church may utilize youth workers as additional helpers. With appropriate supervision, this is a great ministry opportunity for our youth. In those cases, youth under 18 may be eligible helpers if they meet 3 requirements. 1, the same membership or attendance requirement. 2, the same training requirement. And 3, the same covenant requirement. Note that a helper may not be counted as one of the 2 unrelated volunteers or workers leading or supervising a function. However, a helper may lead or supervise a function in addition to those 2. Helpers are a critical part of the ministry of the church. They offer support to supervisors and allow youth to serve in helpful roles. Be sure to provide adequate supervision at any function. A 15-to-1 ratio of children-youth to eligible adult worker volunteer is required. That ratio should be 10-to-1 in the nurseries. Make it safe to avoid risk. Use a lower ratio if there are other factors present, such as children with special needs or activities requiring more supervision, such as working with tools or swimming. Many situations will call for a more conservative ratio. Use your judgment. Now let's review that 3-part golden rule. 1, 2 unrelated eligible persons. 2, uncovered window or open door. 3, 1 person at least 5 years older than the oldest youth or child. A few practical points for volunteers. Be positive. Keep your voice on a level tone. Discourage rough play. Prevent misbehavior and accidents by limiting the ratio of children to adults. Use only safe touches on the shoulder or hand. A responsible adult must sign a child in and out through the end of the child's 4th grade year. Church staff at its discretion may require a sign in and out of children older than 4th grade at any function where it's deemed to be wise under the circumstances. Ask for help if you feel you need more supervision in your group activity. There are specific policy requirements for functions which are held under certain circumstances. Be familiar with the special guidelines for counseling, for out-of-town trips and retreat activities, Those require pre-trip documentation of sleeping arrangements available to parents and guardians before departure. For off-campus events where caravan rules apply. Finally, for visiting groups, which must also comply with the policy. If you are made aware of reported or suspected abuse, you are required under state law to report it. Your only jobs are to report and take care of the victim or reporter. It is never your role to investigate nor verify the truth of a report. The child is never responsible for abuse. The child is never to be blamed. The child is never capable of consent to abusive or sexual behavior. Child abuse is always wrong and is solely the responsibility of the abuser. Care and safety of the victim is first priority.
When reporting, immediately report to a senior pastor, or, in a senior pastor's absence, his or her designee.
If a report cannot be made as described, it must be made to the district superintendent. This policy is not a substitute for the duty to report under Texas law. Let's talk about some frequently asked questions. What if a supervisor needs to leave the room for some reason? If you can locate the leader of the function or church staff, ask for a substitute or assistance while one person needs to leave, or open doors to 2 classrooms and have one volunteer supervise both rooms from the doorway with an additional volunteer inside each room for a brief period as needed. Note that church classrooms are generally structured in pairs to facilitate this practice. What about bathroom breaks? If at all possible, restroom breaks should be avoided during 1-hour functions, such as Sunday school. Children older than 3rd grade are not required to be signed in and out and should be mature enough to make a restroom trip with distant supervision from the door of the classroom. Bear in mind that parents are requested to take their children to the bathroom before a scheduled activity to avoid disruption. If a child requests a bathroom break during a 1-hour event, he or she should be encouraged to wait until the function is over, if at all possible. If he or she must go, send that one child to the restroom and have one of the eligible volunteers wait outside the open classroom with both the class and the bathroom doors visible. Note that church restrooms are generally placed in open spaces to facilitate this practice. For children 4th grade and younger, or for longer functions if necessary, take a class break to the restroom and supervise from outside the restroom door, where you can view the common area and still maintain privacy. All school-age children should be independent during a bathroom visit. During group bathroom visits, the main door to the restroom should remain open with supervising volunteers in the hallway, immediately outside. For preschoolers, any child who cannot routinely take a restroom break without assistance may need to return to the nursery where there are paid workers until she or he has progressed to that point. If a preschool child requires assistance with clothing, the eligible volunteer or worker should give that assistance in the common area of the restroom or outside the restroom, but never inside a stall or private area. Note that church restrooms are generally designed to facilitate this practice, with the common area visible from outside the restroom with an open door. When should I ask for more supervision? Anytime you feel uncomfortable for any reason or that you cannot maintain control of a situation. Also, anytime a child, youth, or adult is physically or verbally hostile or aggressive or seems to need special attention or supervision. If I arrive at a function to volunteer and I see that there are enough adults under the policy, can I leave? Please check with the function leader or staff first. There are many reasons for the ratio requirement, which is a minimum. Part of our ministries are building safe, healthy relationships. A function may require additional supervision in a variety of circumstances. How should workers and volunteers discipline children and youth? If a child or youth is misbehaving to the point of being disruptive, you should redirect his or her attention. You should offer positive reinforcement of good behavior. You should move the child or youth to a different position in the room or new surroundings, but still visible by both or all supervisors. Do not use physical touch to discipline. Do not raise your voice to intimidate. If you cannot control the situation, seek assistance from the leader or staff. What if a non-eligible person wants to observe or visit a function? Observers and visitors are welcome at child-youth functions. Pastors and staff will advise you if there is any exception for any reason. If there's any question, get the approval of the leader or staff. Only those who are designated to supervise and lead a function must be eligible under the policy. If I'm already screened for another organization, such as a school district, law enforcement, scouts, or playgroups, do I have to do it again for Keller United Methodist Church? Yes, the church needs current documentation on each person. Likewise, other organizations would not accept reciprocal screening from the church. Most other agencies would be unwilling to share your prior screening even if we could accept it. All policies vary depending on the organization, demographic, etc. All groups holding functions as defined by our policy must be eligible under this policy and procedure and must follow the Keller UMC Golden Rule. Who will see my background check and references? Records are kept confidential and will be in a locked cabinet or a password-protected file if stored electronically. Records will be provided upon request only to any pastor of the church, the Child and Youth Protection Screening Committee, law enforcement, Department of Family and Protective Services, Child Protective Services, the Central Texas Conference of the United Methodist Church, and in response to a court order or valid subpoena. Here are a few guidelines for volunteers. Arrive 10 minutes before the function to greet parents and be sure that the function is well supervised. Plan to stay 10 minutes after the function to dismiss children and youth. Know who is leading the event in case you need help or more supervisors. Wear your name tag. And avoid use of cell phones or electronics during these functions. Here are a few guidelines for parents. Make sure that your child or youth takes a restroom break before functions. Bring your child or youth to a function on time, but no more than 10 minutes early, to allow volunteers and workers time to arrive. Communicate any concerns before you leave your child or youth in the care of workers and volunteers. Finally, pick up your child within 10 minutes after a function ends. How do I become an eligible volunteer? If you're a new applicant, please follow instructions on these next few slides. If you're a current eligible volunteer seeking to renew, that process will be explained in a few minutes. To become an eligible volunteer, meet the membership or attendance requirement plus 3 more steps. 1. Attend a training session, either in person or online. This training session meets this requirement and you will certify your completion in the covenant. 2. Screening. Provide 3 references who have known you for at least 3 years. Forward the link on the church website to your 3 references to send e-signed forms or give their contact information to the church office, and our staff will mail or email a paper copy to your references to complete. Additionally, agree to a criminal history check now and at random in the future. Print and sign the criminal history consent form on the website. Finally, 3, print and sign the participation covenant. Be sure that you have read and understand the current policy before you sign the covenant. So let's review how you become an eligible adult volunteer. Be sure to turn into the church office 3 things. 1, attend this training session, either in person or online. This training meets this requirement and you will certify your completion in the covenant. 2, print and sign the participation covenant. Be sure that you read and understand the current policy before you sign the covenant. 3, print and sign the criminal history consent. And 4, submit references from 3 people. Let's review how to become an eligible youth volunteer, an approved volunteer who is 16 or 17 years old. Meet the membership or attendance requirement plus 2 more steps. Attend a training session, either in person or online. This training meets this requirement. You'll certify your completion in the covenant. Also, print and sign the participation covenant. Be sure that you have read and understand the current policy before you sign the covenant. Let's review how to become an eligible helper under age 18. Again, attending a training session either in person or online, and this training meets this requirement. You will certify your completion in the covenant. Print and sign the participation covenant. Be sure that you have read and understand the current policy before you sign the covenant. If you are a new applicant, your training is complete. Continue the slideshow to see how to renew your eligibility in the future. Check with the church office in a few weeks to confirm your eligibility. If you're currently eligible and you're seeking to renew your eligibility, there are 3 steps. Attend a training session, either in person or online. This online training meets this requirement. You will certify your completion in the covenant. 2, agree to a criminal history check now and at random in the future. Print and sign the criminal history consent form. Print and sign the participation covenant. Be sure that you have read and understand the current policy before you sign the covenant. Let's review how to renew your eligibility. After completing this training, be sure you turn into the church office 2 things. 1, print and sign a new criminal history consent. 2, print and sign a new participation covenant. If you are renewing your eligibility, your training is now complete. In all of our ministries with children and youth, this congregation is committed to demonstrating the love of Jesus Christ so that each child will be surrounded by steadfast love, established in the faith, and confirmed and strengthened in a way that leads to life eternal. Thank you for sharing our commitment to the safety of children and youth.